So Captain Marvel has been out for a little while, which can only mean one thing. It is time for a spoiler video. So this is your official spoiler warning for Captain Marvel. Only watch this if you have already seen Captain Marvel, or you just genuinely don't care about having the film ruined for you. But either way, this is your final warning. So I know it's not really a spoiler for the overall film, but one thing I did want to get out of the way nice and early in this is the opening sequence for Captain Marvel and the Marvel logo popping up with all of Stan Lee's cameos from the Marvel films of the last 10 years. Even thinking about it now is starting to make me a little bit sad. I really thought that was a genuinely nice touch to include that. So one of the big twists that turns around the story of Captain Marvel is the fact that the Skrulls turn out to not be the bad guys. This is kind of a really big deal in a way, because it does open up a lot of questions. What I liked about this is that it shows that history is written by the victors, and that war is only really like good guys and bad guys depending on whose perspective that you're seeing it from. You only get one side of the story for half of the film, and as soon as you get the other side of the story, you realize that like Star Force and the Kree are not necessarily the bad guys, but they're kind of like the bullies. But what you don't necessarily get is the backstory as to what caused all of that, what started it all, why the Skrulls are now victims and the Kree are the persecutors. So maybe touching on that a little bit more would have been something that I would have liked to have seen in Captain Marvel, but respect to Marvel Studios, there does maybe have to be some things that you hold back and hold on to in order to use that later on in other films and other sequels. So maybe that's something we will get in a future Captain Marvel film, and a little bit more explanation to the Kree-Skrull war. What this means is that Ben Mendelsohn's character of Talos, the main Skrull, turns out to be a really kind of enjoyable character to watch after that turning point, and I actually liked watching him, not just because he's Ben Mendelsohn and he's a good actor, but also because this character then has a turning point and has an emotional conflict that you can kind of get behind and understand. Whether this will then lead on to mean that Secret Invasion can or cannot happen as a storyline, because Skrulls are now not necessarily the bad guys, remains to be seen. This could just be one small sect of the Skrull community that are victims, that are being persecuted, and actually there's a whole other lot of Skrulls that aren't being victimized and aren't being persecuted and might be the bad guys. But again, this is something that they've held back that we will have to see in future. So whether this was just a big twist for the sake of having a big twist in Captain Marvel and turning preconceptions of what you thought characters to be on their heads for the sake of this film remains to be seen, but within the confines of this film, I did enjoy seeing that. I enjoyed seeing the fact that the Tesseract was the source of power for this light speed drive after this whole time. Again, it raises a few questions as to how Mar-Vell, played by Annette Bening in this film, because again, subverting expectations, Mar-Vell in this character is Annette Bening and not Jude Law as everyone expected it to be. How she came into possession of the Tesseract, again, is something that needs to be seen, but holding stuff back, maybe that gets revealed in something else later on. But seeing the Tesseract did kind of awaken that little bit of, oh, this is going back to phase 1 of all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, where they were all fighting over this one big item that everyone's trying to get their hands on and has significant value. So seeing that appear out of nowhere did definitely take me by surprise. But again, this does open a whole other lot of questions, like, are we going to see more history behind the Tesseract, and who possessed it at what points, and is that going to get more explanation in later films? opens up a whole can of worms, really. One thing that I've heard a lot of people saying was a really kind of dumb thing that happened in the film was the explanation of Nick Fury's eye, and the fact that it was actually scratched by a cat. Okay, it's not actually a cat, it's an alien that's disguised as a cat, so you can kind of get away with it. But a lot of people have been saying that that was a really dumb thing to have happen, and how does that tie in with what he said in Winter Soldier, when he said, the last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye? I've got to say that maybe this isn't such a dumb thing. I think that the fact that it happened that way is maybe a little bit of a reveal behind his character, but maybe it says more than just the fact that he got scratched by a cat. Maybe it says more that the legend surrounding how he lost his eye gets so misconstrued by other people that it just builds Nick Fury up more and more and more, the more wild rumours that get spread around about it. So maybe that's a dumb thing, maybe it isn't a dumb thing. I'm still in debates about it, but when it happened in the film, I was quite surprised, and I was sort of a bit like, no, that can't really be it, surely. But turns out Nick Fury had his eye scratched out by a cat. So... And yeah, they obviously do leave the ending open for future Captain Marvel films that might take place after this, and obviously they will probably be a little bit more back in time before she comes back and rejoins the fight on Earth in Endgame. So perhaps there's a little bit more of a cosmic adventure in Captain Marvel's next film. She's going from planet to planet, and it might open up the Marvel Cinematic Universe even more with previously undiscovered races of aliens, and maybe there's more stuff out there that she's been doing this entire time. But again, we can only really theorize at this point, and I think a lot of people were maybe pleased that they got some answers about Captain Marvel, but it opened up even more questions. And the Endgame mid-credits was a really fun thing to see. I didn't expect to see that kind of tie in so immediately into Avengers Endgame, but what that could be is a little bit like with Ant-Man, where the end credits scene was just the scene from Civil War. So maybe this is a scene that we will actually get in Avengers Endgame, and it's just a small scene that has played out as a mid-credit sequence. So there we have it, a spoiler talk for Captain Marvel. Some questions were asked, some questions were answered. But what were your favourite spoiler points from Captain Marvel? What were your biggest reveals from the film, and what are your mad theories about what all of this could really mean for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole? All comments are welcome in the comments section below. Let's talk nerdy. As always, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here and you want to see more, you can click right here to subscribe and see some more funky fresh videos from yours truly. And until that point, that is not a cat, that is a Flerken, and I do not trust it, and that is why I don't trust cats.